hit the button. We're live. This has been a while.
It's been a wee while.
I know. I've forgotten how to do this.
No, let's.
It'll all come flooding back.
All come flooding back. And what we do is we start off with some jokes, don't we, Chris?
Oh, well. No, I've already been insulted. I've already been insulted this morning. Been told I look like a shambles.
I didn't say
an effing disaster.
No, I said you looked like a bit of a disaster. I didn't say that.
Apparently, you can't wear a hoodie with chinos.
Look, Stuart, have a word with this man. I'm just saying he's got a hoodie and a t-shirt and then like sports trainers on and chinos, and I think it just looks like it's a little smart sandwich in between two casual slices of bread.
I didn't know I was going to get rated.
You were abusive to me first, so
all right.
Anyway, tell us your really, really funny jokes.
Oh, the one that I sent at the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Come on then.
Right, come on.
The suspense is killing us.
What do you call? No, I'm not doing it.
Come on.
What do you call a detective that solves crimes accidentally?
I don't know. What do you call a detective that solves crimes accidentally?
Sherlock Holmes.
We are good. We are a brand consultancy in the UK, and it's been a while since I've done this.
it's a wee bit.
So I'm just trying to work out where are we, and that, and so from time to time we get together and we'll talk about brand, and today is no exception. And today we are going to talk about something that Chris wrote for the blog with the great title, brand strategy is business strategy. It's a very Chris title.
And it's tearing up the internet, isn't it? It's tearing up the internet.
It's totally tearing up the internet.
Like,
is it 30 likes?
I don't think anything's ever had 30 likes.
No, I don't think we've
hit 30. Is it doing better than the Onions, the brand Onions?
Well, the Onions, people come in and hit on Google, they'll type in what is a brand onion. They then hit the page. We come up number 1 or 2 in Google. People come, go, oh, okay, that's not what I wanted, and then leave.
But they've still been there.
Like, oh, they learn. They came in more educated than they leave when they leave. So that's all good. But anyway, like this article, brand strategy is business strategy. Chris, what compelled you to put pen to paper?
I don't know. I don't know where it came from, but I love the title. I think it's your title, Stuart. Actually, I love the title, and it was linked to discussions and maybe learnings that we're of the view, and we believe here that if someone's going to spend some money in brand, we need to have an idea of what the outcome's going to be, or try to, and that's difficult because if you don't, then all you're doing is just doing stuff in a vacuum. And I think that part of the reflection in the article was that quite often we're given briefs where clearly there's been no thought about what the outcome should be or could be. It exists in a silo. And I know that I get told off for saying these things. Julie tells me off sometimes. But
what do I tell you off?
Well, you know what I mean. I'm not being critical of clients because I understand how it happens. And, we don't have the baggage that the clients have in terms of, politics and all that stuff. But
complex organizations.
Yeah. But I think that it, where we can, we should try and measure it. And Stuart, this is something that you talk about all the time, that if it's not pulling in the same direction as the business strategy, then what is it doing? Yeah.
So as you say in the article, Chris, that sounds blindingly obvious. And you do you say that's the brand strategy should be tied into things, but you're saying that you get still quite surprised when what's deemed a brand campaign isn't actually rooted back to some kind of
well, I think that often the way my inference from how clients are sometimes is that they have to get sign off of budget to get stuff to spend money, and quite often what happens is that becomes the defining kind of driver of the spend, rather than linking it to something bigger and determining whether we should actually spend more or less or whatever. So they come with a budget signed off, and it becomes almost we've got approval to spend, and nothing else really matters. It doesn't really matter. So little is expected in terms of return that it's siloed off as a spend. Do you know what I mean?
So the fight
it's not linked.
To Julie's point, a complex organisation, the fight is getting the budget rather than that.
Yeah,
that's where
sometimes I think that's true. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm not being critical because I understand why it happens, but I'm saying I see it potentially as our obligation or our job to actually dig a bit harder and try and make that work a bit better. And that's the type of work that we want to do. That's the type of work we are invested in doing and want to get our arms around. Otherwise, we are just creating stuff for the sake of creating stuff, and we don't know whether it works or not. And actually, no one's asking the question. No one seems to care. So we want to make more of it. So it does sound blindingly obvious, but it is amazing how often it's overlooked, and it's
seen as and you say it in the article. I think that it doesn't help in the exercise of trying to ensure that brand and investment in brand isn't just seen as an expense, but it's seen as an investment in the business.
You could even say it's an investment in change, because what you're trying to do is change. If there is if you're trying to get brand strategy to invoke some to connect it to the business strategy, then you would assume that what you're doing with the business strategy, you're not kind of puddling on same as usual. You're always trying to change the marketplace or our supply chain or I don't know stuff. So the brand has got to contribute to that change.
And I think for us, it's a tell sometimes about how important brand or the esteem in which brand is held within an organisation and how powerful it's deemed to be, and how much where the belief of the equity of that actually lies. And so at some level, that's on us, because we need to take the work that we want to do rather than the work that's there.
Just as an extension of that point, really, the conversation we've had previously about having brand and marketing as a function represented at a leadership level until clients and marketing teams and functions and show a demonstrable return in the investment, then that's not going to get any easier.
And time's an issue. We were chatting. You brought it up that the average tenure of a CMO
is like 2 years or something.
Not very long. So, and it tends to take longer, I think, when you're investing in brand. It's that whole long and the short and the immediacy of.
I'm going to be an arse, right?
I'm
going to be I know.
We're well used to
I'm going to
So go ahead.
Reverting to type. So obviously there's the kind of thing, but like you're talking about brand strategy and we're talking about time being an issue, and we're going to let that all roll out, and the tenure of a CMO being a short amount of time, so they've got to make an impact. And then what you do is you decide to allocate a lot of money in performance marketing, because that you can then start to see the green arrows starting to go up. Is that not the ultimate sign of things working, the green arrow? And so there is a lot of breathing space within organisations to get that. I'm hearing the sigh already.
No, you're right. That is the challenge.
Yeah. But that's the short-term view, though, isn't it? The green arrows will only continue to go up in the short term if you don't invest in brand for the longer term.
But it's easier for me to measure and take that to a board, though. That's the challenge. And that's the challenge.
We live in an immediate world now, don't we? So, and combined with the short tenure of term in a marketing position, is it any wonder that performance marketing, all the money's pumped into there? But I think and it does, there are green arrows, but I think Jules' point's right, is that there's that tiered effect, isn't there, of you're only going to take it so far. You're going to have to invest in the brand in the longer term.
And it's like you talk about, or we talk about with our own fees, if that's not too sensitive a topic to talk about. But as soon as you start purely competing on price, which essentially is what that's not purely what lead gen activity is doing, but it is very much a race to the bottom. Then that can't be a long term strategy for growth.
Successful brands are built over the long term, and the best approach is to harness, as we know, as we've talked about, the short and the long, and balance the budget. And we'll not get into that here because it's a different podcast and it's a different philosophy, but it's a different subject. But that's going to be the best approach, balancing both. Everyone needs to be open to sort of the longer term benefits of spending money on brand and understanding how to measure that.
I think you're right. I think that because if we take that as a basic premise that's understood for today's discussion, then it's because otherwise that's a completely separate. But it is.
But it does lead into my next point about that, because what you then got to do.
Are you still being an arse at this
I'm
point?
still totally being an arse. And so the interesting thing
about that.
I can
argue with Stuart today.
But the interesting point with that is that because you can see why brand starts to get pushed out the way, and I think this is the point that we're trying to make, because the measurement happens further on. And the kind of interesting thing is where can brand help itself a little bit when you've kind of got performance marketing, which is getting reported, depending on budget, on an hourly basis if it's working or not working. Where can the measurement fit in to kind of show at the same, and it won't be at the same speed because it is a different beast, but more regular heartbeats, more regular check-ins, that seems to be the challenge, rather than saying, yeah, we'll get something to you by the end of the year.
I think, and that's the challenge, because when you talk about, a lot of what we talk about with clients or have done is changing perceptions, shifting perceptions, and ultimately that's about whether that's growing in a particular sector or category, or whether it's increasing margin or whatever the business goal is. It's those aren't, from a brand perspective, those aren't metrics that you're going to see significant change in a 12-month or even 2-year, 3-year period, to significantly shift the needle so to be seen as an innovator in the category, that's not something that's going to happen after a 12-week brand campaign. So that kind of consistent, that's back to what we've talked about before, it's consistency, isn't it? Consistency over a longer period of time will eventually, initiate change. But that's then something, there's the investment then on the tail end of that, or the back end of that I think is also important to, like you say, Stuart, understand what are the milestones. How can we course correct if it's not working? And that involves a kind of an investment in whether it's brand tracking, whether it's effectiveness research, whatever it may be. There's a whole suite of tools you can use for that, obviously. But it needs a understanding of what the goal is, an investment in brand, and then an investment and a commitment to understanding if it's working, and if it's not, course correcting on the way.
Mm-hmm. So it depends what your green arrows are, what they're measuring.
Well, I mean, tying it back to the business strategy, obviously, that is what you would hope.
The why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And it's also, we have to get comfortable with the fact that spending money in brand in this space is more, and I keep saying this, but I think it's a really good phrase, it's more probabilistic than predetermined. You can't say if we do this here, that will definitely happen in 18 months. But it's about measuring the journey and course correcting on the way, as Jules said, I think is important. Whereas I think in the performance marketing space, it's much more sort of in that predetermined space. If you do this, this will happen.
Yeah.
And although it's been proved and shown and demonstrated that a lot of that stuff that happens isn't actually human activity, it's it's bots and all sorts of stuff, and there's money spent in there that's
it's not understood.
It's not understood, and what happens is we go down a rabbit hole. I think we should just push on and talk about. So, okay, there are some examples.
Fire us up with some examples.
So in the article, it's maybe useful to talk about some examples and just look at how and different outcomes, examples of outcomes with different brand tasks. So one of the things I think that's quite a well-trodden path, and we've done quite a lot of it, and the DBA, there are awards for design effectiveness, being able to isolate the role of design. And in drinks packaging, that's quite easy to do. I think if packaging exercises are designed to help premiumize a brand or squeeze more margin. And that makes sense. So that's a business goal, and then changes to the packaging and changes to the costs around the packaging. Even if you're increasing it slightly, you can still probably command a higher price. And that's really easy to measure, isn't it? Because there's a clear run of activity before the change, and there's a performance related to that link. And you flip the change over a period, and there's a performance related to that, and you can very, very accurately determine the effect of the design and the spend and the return on the investment and spend in the packaging, and it's nice and clean, and in a way, that's a perfect example of how easy it is to measure performance on quite a delivery focused outcome.
Yeah, so looking at that, the business strategy is we need to earn an extra £4 on each bottle.
Correct.
And then the brand strategy behind that is we need to premiumize that purchase so that by adding an extra £1 on, so that actually people will be happier to pay £4 because they feel it's premium.
So there's a brand and a business task in there. The activity is executional focus, is the way I was talking about. It's by design, and that's great. But if you then compare that to something much more kind of delicate, like an example I gave was linked around brand architecture. So there may be some work that needs to be done to remove friction, to make the choice architecture, if you like, easier for consumers to follow. It may be that you need to create new naming conventions or whatever it is, or repatriate some of the equity back into the mother brand and all of that kind of stuff to create a new brand architecture structure. These are very nuanced pieces of issues and pieces of work that don't necessarily have explicit start and stop points. And it can take months and it can take years for these things to bed in and evolve and take root. But the end game is still the same. There's a gain. So what you're maybe doing is preventing your bleeding value to competition or someone else, but you're reducing the inefficiencies and you're making it tighter. That should be measured too. And there should be, so much of this is about spending the time before we act to think about how we could measure something, right? So the two things are very difficult. So they're very different. The whiskey lends itself much more to a measurement impact, but the brand architecture one is much more challenging, I would argue.
So again, to take it down, business strategy will be where it's costing us too much money to maintain all these brands, or we want to save money.
Yeah,
will be the business strategy, and then looking at it, we can say, well, actually, you've got too many products, and it's costing you've got too many mouths to feed.
Yeah,
too many separate.
And then so then the brand strategy is then right. We're going to go through a naming process to reduce that and reduce the friction, which will have the benefit of internal, because you're not needing to manage it, and ideally then a clearer proposition to your customer.
And there are lots of cost efficiencies in there, aren't there, to work through and understand. But these are, as you say, bigger business decisions, I think, that touch brand, and the two things are linked. But the point is, I think that there's no reason why we shouldn't think about what some of these assumptive outcomes could be before we start the project. And it may be that once you start going, that one or two of them don't work, fine, but at least you've got some sort of metric you can change and evolve it and look to measure, which is really important. And again, I think I go on to say that they don't need to be hugely explicit in their outcomes either. And it may be that they're only contributing in part to a much bigger business objective. That's something else we need to bear in mind. That it may just be a tiny contribution, but it's still a contribution, and it's still important to define what that's going to be. But by keeping an eye on that objective and those, it allows us to guide decision making. It stops us getting stuck in subjective cul-de-sacs about creative and stuff like that, which is the usual sticky point. We get bogged down in that. It helps you elevate away from that.
Helps manage some of the internal politics that we sometimes see as well between different departments and functions with potentially slightly differing objectives in many cases. So again, if you have that sort of benchmark, it just brings all the conversations and decisions back to that, doesn't it?
And so they don't need to necessarily be outwardly commercial either. It could be, they don't need to be about making money. They can be about saving money, or as Jules said, they could be about brand track. They could be about how people feel or their behaviour, or
it could be internally focused.
So just as long as they're thought about, written down and challenged, and they're robust before we kick off, that's what's really important.
So the challenge, I would say, in some instances, is that a business will come around and say, right, our goal for the next year is to increase sales by 10%. And instantly what happens is that becomes a sell more product story. And the challenge then is kind of where does brand fit into supporting that as much as anyone else?
It's too broad a goal. We talk about this, don't we, about goals and objectives and smart objectives and all that kind of stuff. I think you then have to work harder to say, well, what is the contribution? What are we going to?
No, I think quite often what we also see is where we do have the opportunity to have those conversations at a much kind of broader business level, is that actually then defining the scope of work for that brand activity is part of our job. So we'll work with the client to say the challenges with delivering that based on your current architecture or X, Y, or whatever it may be, and actually that kind of defines what the delivery is.
And that's what I mean. While that's a broad business goal, then it's up to brand to kind of work out how they're going to support and contribute to that 10%. Sure. And it might not all be. It's not that it's going to sit with any one area, but it goes to your point, right? Like it's impossible to work out if you're going to get an extra 10% if nobody thinks your product's any good, and you can only get that by a bit of brand tracking to understand where you are, what is it, but that's the digging in, and there's a lot of areas that you can go into it, but it's understanding if that's a business goal, what's the brand strategy to support that business goal.
And it is, Jules is right, I agree, it is our job, I think, to help clients define some of those outcomes, or help them in that broad space before the brief is formalised and approved.
Yeah.
Because we have quite a lot of knowledge and experience from a wide variety of clients and sectors about how what's likely to work and what doesn't work and what might work. So it would be sensible for clients to engage with us to talk about that before the predetermined or self-diagnosed brief comes through to say
it's understanding.
It's all locked and loaded within here, off you go kind of thing.
Understanding or being clear about the problem, but not necessarily being self-diagnosing the solution before we've kind of had an opportunity to engage.
Yeah, and that can, as we say in the place in the article, that can take us to many different places. You know, around defining brands and understanding customers and journeys, or creating content, or creating strategies around content. There's lots and lots of parts of that, but it's about having the experience and the knowledge to understand where the friction is likely to lie, and what the prescribed solution is likely to be from our point of view to help.
And then on top of that solution, it's the measurement of that. Because once you've understood, right, here's the business problem, here's how brand can contribute to that problem, then it's making sure that we've got metrics in there, be it maybe possibly brand track, whatever, again, as wide and as varied as possibly the solution is, but just making sure that we've got the check-in to make sure that we know that the brand's going on in the right way, as you said, Julie, to course correct, just in case there's things that,
Yeah, and that seems blindingly obvious. But again, it's amazing how often it gets lost.
Agreed.
I think as well, though, we talk about it with our own business sometimes, don't we? But I think clients would, it's I'm going to quote a Stuartism if I can remember it. It's the kind of launch and move on mindset versus the test and learn, and I think so often, because of the complexities of the businesses our clients are operating in, these things are sometimes siloed more than probably even a client would like, because it is delivering against a very specific objective that might not even necessarily be a marketing objective. Maybe it's something related to product or launching product or whatever. So it's a kind of, okay, that's tick, done, move on to the next thing. And actually just the time and the headspace and the capacity within that organisation to be able to reflect and do that course correction stuff isn't always there. I think, and one thing that, this is probably a slightly different tangent as well, or another tangent, but one thing we've talked about in the past and seen a lot is that we're particularly, and I think probably B2B organisations probably are worse for this than consumer spaces, where brands try and do a little bit of both. So you try and do a bit of brand and a bit of product in one communication. So you're trying to do this product's great because X, Y, and Z, and you should believe that because our brand's great because of X, Y, and Z, and it just gets quite...
You get a list of features.
It becomes quite a complex communication quite quickly, because it's not, you lose that kind of single-minded
noise. Yeah. I mean, and I think that because there's a client just now that are kind of interested, because it's exciting. They worked on it for a while and they want to kind of get to the nice activation stuff, but at the moment nobody knows who they are, where they are, or what they do. And you've got to get, that's where the brand can fit in, and you start building associations around things to kind of get, so that when you want to talk about the good stuff, that a lot of it is just embedded and is a bit of a given.
No, I was just going to say, I think, and this is again taking it slightly into sort of media placement and stuff like that, but if you think about formats and media formats and how short they are now, whether it's a social post or whether it's a 6-second YouTube pre-roll ad, that's the time frame you've got to communicate. So if you're trying to, it's a slightly different point, because it's more about the simplicity of the communication and back to kind of value prop and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the more complex you make it, the less resonance it's going to have.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. So there we have it. That's kind of what the whole article's about. There's no right or wrong.
Give us a sum up,
It's just a whole load of kind of a brain dump. Yeah. So, I think the point is, the point that I wanted to make was that we understand that there are challenges from the client side about how this ends up spitting out a brief that's fully formed and, if you like, separate from the wider business objectives. But I think the important thing is that when you work with a firm who asks those questions, we can help to create those links where possible, and not just run away and activate in isolation. So it's about letting us help you to create the right kind of brief, and the brief that's linked to a broader business objective, right? Mm-hmm. It's no more or less complicated than that. And when you say it like that, you think, how did I manage to write three sides of paper on that?
Not only that, we've got 40 minutes out of it. And maybe more like 20 by the time Stuart
once you edit it down. But it is amazing how often it comes up, and how often we need to keep circling back and talking about it.
Keeping ourselves accountable, keeping the work accountable, isn't it?
Keeping the work accountable. I like that.
I like it too.
I like that. All right.
I like you both.
I like you too.
I don't like either of you.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.